The following is a presentation of the Belly Up Sports Media Network.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to College Football Coast to Coast. As we told you guys last week, we are excited to get into the Power 5, of course, our season in review series. We finished with a group of 5 last week. Now we're getting into the Pac-12 this week. This is an exciting one. I know you and I have circled it on our calendar. Of course, Tyler is joining me, as always. We can't do Coast to Coast without the two of us. So we are here, I guess 1.5 bodies. I am a little bit under the weather. I'm going to try to fight through this episode. Just haven't felt the best the last couple days. So we'll try to battle through it. We're going to keep it short today. Of course, we're only talking about one conference, so it won't be very long today. But of course, Tyler, getting into it, I don't know what your thoughts were, overall for the Pac-12 as a whole this season. What were your thoughts, your expectations going into the season? And of course, how do you think it finished compared to some of the other big conferences?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question that you bring to the table. And as a first, I always have to bring up our preseason show. We both had Utah winning this conference. I believe I had Utah and USC in the conference championship. So I called that. You had that as well. But really, the most surprising was that I got most improved team this the Washington Huskies. They really had a phenomenal season, 11-2 season. And then you had some teams like Stanford. They fired David Shaw quit on Stanford, but Stanford fired him. Colorado didn't have this season that they were hoping for at 1-11, but their future is looking bright with Deion Sanders. So that's a historic program that we're not used to seeing. And then we saw likes of Arizona State struggle without Herm Edwards. They ended up firing him middle of the season and losing Jaden Daniels. That was definitely a really gut punch to them. Emory Jones didn't really have this season that I was expecting for Arizona State. I expected Arizona State to be around a 6-6. Just didn't really pile up on the wins in the conference. And then you keep going up, and then you see UCLA. This could be a team that some of us may have as our most disappointment or a loser team. I mean, UCLA, a 9-4 season, that's still a very good season, but really the talent that you look at, this could have been a team that went to Las Vegas. They had DTR. They have Zach Charbonnet coming out of the backfield. They have a very good tight end. I think their defense was good enough to win them ball games. You saw in the South Alabama game where it got a little bit tested. The Oregon game really fall flat. The USC game as well. They gave up 45 points and over 600 yards of offense. And then of your surprising teams, Oregon State 9-10 in the Vegas Bowl, and then obviously at the top, Utah. Really a slow start to their season. It was very shocking to see them lose against Florida. But Florida, I mean, that was a bad loss. Now that we look back on it, Florida finished their season 6-7 with their first year head coach Billy Napier. We'll definitely get to them. And then you have Oregon and USC. Those were two new schools with new quarterbacks. You have Bo Nix coming from Auburn for Oregon. And then you had some stars, you got to replace on the Ducks defense. You lose Kayvon Thibodeau to the NFL draft. I think they did a good job really doing the cores. It's a very young defense, and it's going to be young defense, but they definitely have a good recruiting class coming in this year. And then USC, a lot of star power coming in. You had Jordan Addison from Pitt, Caleb Williams from Oklahoma. Then you also had a new face at head coach. So I think everything really to my plans in fruition. Just some teams at the bottom, like Stanford, I didn't really see finishing that low.
Yeah, so I mean, there you have it, folks. That's kind of our both
It's a
of
long
our,
rundown.
long rundown of how the season finished out for these teams and kind of where we had them. Of course, we did pick the two teams, like you said, that did go to the Pac-12 championship. But some of those teams down there didn't ultimately shake out the way that we thought it would during through the course of the season. But of course, it is that time like we did last week for our standout, our loser, and our most improved team within the Pac 12. Of course, we'll always start with our loser first and we'll work our way up to the standout. Tyler, who is your loser for the Pac 12 conference this year?
My loser, I could have gone with the bottom team. For me, like I just mentioned, really the talent that they had coming back to only get 9 wins. I feel like this team could have been 11-1, 10-2 season, but they had some games where they almost lost it. This could have been a 5-loss team if they didn't make that game-winning field goal against a very good South Alabama team, a team that we talked about last week on the show. But UCLA is my loser for. Obviously, I could have went with Stanford, Colorado, but those were some on-par teams. I didn't really think that those were going to be the teams to really compete. But I did have UCLA as a dark horse coming in. I feel like they would have been on the lines of a Washington and Oregon, but they just weren't around that. They were on the same level with Oregon State, a team that we were very high on. So UCLA is going to be a team that I'm going to be watching for next year. I think that this could be a team where they go from 9-4 to potentially not even making a bowl game. They're losing a lot of key guys, especially on the offensive side. DTR is going to the NFL draft. Their top receiver is gone, and then you lose Zach Charbonnet. So hopefully Chip Kelly can get some really good recruits. It's National Signing Day this Wednesday, so hopefully they can get a good recruiting class. It's going to be tough to replace those guys, but it's really a small stepping stone. But for me this season, I really had high expectations for UC. 9-win season is very good season for them, but for my expectations, they are under the category of loser for me.
Yeah, for me, you referenced them really quick. For me, it's Colorado. Just one win this year is just not acceptable for a Power 5 conference.
No.
11 losses is ridiculous, especially with the schedule that you played out of conference. Should have been able to at least get 2 or 3 wins on the season. I probably am not talking about them if they do have 2 wins on the season. But 1 win is just terrible. It's just not acceptable in a Power 5 school. So, and of course, things are coming and changing. I think this is probably the last time that I'll have Colorado on my loser. Maybe next season I'll have them in my most improved.
Yeah.
Which probably is where they will be next year if everything does go out to plan. But yeah, I mean, it's just not acceptable for them to finish dead last in the conference. I think that Cal was a worse team than they were. I think Arizona was a worse team. That should have been a worse team than they were. Of course, Stanford. I don't think anybody really was high on Stanford to begin with. But it's those schools that kind of bring up the rear, and Colorado's been there for some time, and it's just time for them to get out of the hole in the ground, and be competitive. So I think it's coming here next season. So we'll have to see. But of course, Tyler, getting to our next one, our most improved. Who is your most improved team in the Pac-12?
Yeah, I saw actually coming that Colorado is going to be a loser since they made you look like a fool in week 1 when you picked them to beat TCU on the road, but that didn't happen. But I'm sure that she'll be picking the Horned Frogs this year, going into 2023 when TCU hosts them. But most improved for me is going to be the Beavers of Oregon State. I feel like they're a sense on the right direction. A group of five, if you all watched our show last or Tuesday, whatever it was, I'm really don't remember what day it was, but I had like teams like East Carolina and then teams like Tulane can be my most improved. The programs that I see is going to be. So I think that Oregon State, I think with the talent that they're coming back, they are losing Armar Spates, their top linebacker. He said to Baton Rouge, but it's going to be interesting. They're going to have DJU now as their quarterback competition, but that is their guy. He really showed me a lot in the second half of the season. I think their running game is there. They have receivers that can really beat you. And then also, I think that their defense is very chippy. They really held USC to the lowest amount of points that anybody did this season. So I think that Oregon State, this is a program on a rise, a program that we really haven't talked about as we do on this show, but I'm going to give them the credit of most improved in the Pac-12.
Yeah, I think, getting to my most improved team, my team that's, really caught my eye this season was probably UCLA, and it was late in the season that they caught my eye. They had potential this season, and it seems like it just got there too late. I'll give them most improved for that. Of course, I can't pick Oregon State because, but I would love to go with Oregon State because, if everything was perfect in the world, they would be my most improved, only because uh of where that team came out of nowhere to be a 10-win team, and I was really high on them last year for Oregon State. So I guess I'll go with Oregon State. They'll be my most improved, just because of just their offense's unbelievable defense, being able to hold an SEC team to nothing in a bowl game is incredible. I just think that, there's a lot of upside for this team. And they're going to be a team to be a dark horse for the Pac-12 title, I think. And, they're going to give teams a run for their money like USC. And we very well could see USC and Oregon State face off in the Pac-12 championship, or we could see Oregon and Oregon State in a state battle for the Pac-12 championship. But it's possible. Of course, you've got Gilbranson there at quarterback. He's unbelievable quarterback. I think he's underrated in the Pac-12, an underrated quarterback in the country, and still has a little bit of time left. So I like Oregon State. I like the Beavers to be my most improved team. Before we get to our standout, of course, the Pac-12 season review is sponsored by Fanatics. If you guys want to go get all of your Fanatics merch, you guys can head over to the link below in our show, or you can see it there on our live on the screen there. You guys can go over there and copy that down and go support the show and support our little small network that is growing ever so rapidly. We were just talking about that last night, about how great it's been on both of our shows for Coast to Coast and Sports Scramble, and how much interaction we've gotten from you guys and how well it's been. And we are over the moon and have blown our expectations out of the water so far. So we are going to keep setting those high goals and keep shooting higher. Of course, if you guys want any of that Fanatics merch, you guys can head over there, pick it up, your championship merch from the college football season, or you can get ready and get your AFC and NFC merch to get ready for the Super Bowl coming up in a couple of weeks. But of course, you guys can head over there. They're always running deals. Head to the link below in our show. Getting to our standouts, Tyler, who is your stand-up for the Pac-12? I'm interested to see who it is, because there's a couple of teams still hanging around there that could be your standout, and I'm very curious to find out who it is.
Yeah, this is probably going to be my toughest selection of the standout. I feel like the Pac-12 was one of the better conferences. I don't think that if the people and us, even including us, thought that the Pac-12 was going to be this good. They ultimately didn't get any teams in the playoff. I thought as a conference from top to bottom, well, outside of the teams at the bottom, especially Colorado, no one really saw them with one win, but they had a tough conference schedule, especially with the runner-ups of the national championship and TCU. But this team was a team that I was very high on from the beginning of the season all the way to the end. they were my first upset alert pick, and that is going to be the Washington Huskies. I think that best overall team from top to bottom. I think that Utah, they were a very good football team, but you saw in the game against Penn State where they lose their quarterback and they're very, very vulnerable. Saying that like they're a very bad football team without them, I'm looking at from start to finish. I just feel like Utah, I just can't get over them losing the swamp against Florida. I know that Anthony Richardson, that was his best game of the season, but Utah's defense really had some struggles, especially in the first meeting against USC. They gave up 44 points against the Trojans. Very good job against them in the Pac-12 championship. But Washington, to me, I mean, if it wasn't for that tiebreaker that went down between a couple of teams, the 7-2, Washington, Oregon, and Utah, you nod because they had their opposing conference was harder than the rest. It was Utah was the hardest strength of schedule based on record in the conference, and then it was Oregon, and then Washington. But Washington did beat Oregon on the road. That was a very good win. That was probably one of their best wins of the season. They had a big win against the top 15 team, Michigan State, which was a team that we didn't really have any high hopes on with them losing. Kenneth Walker, especially, that offense really took a step back. But Washington, to me, just felt team bottom. They showed it in their bowl game. Their defense really stepped up. And Michael Penix coming back next year, watch out, because this Washington team not only could make the Pac-12 championship, but they can make a run to the college football playoff once again.
Yeah, I think for me, my standout, Washington was a very good pick. I had a feeling it was either Washington or maybe one
The
other.
Purple Rain, baby.
Yeah, so I'm gonna roll with the other team that I thought you would pick, and that's the Utah Utes. For me, Utah, it's their whole season in a review. I can't just look at the end of their season. Of course, they lose the Rose Bowl championship game to Penn State, which I was happy about. Of course, a long time viewers of the show know that I'm a big Penn State fan, so it was good for me. For Utah, though, um, you know, you go to the Pac-12, you're back-to-back Pac-12 champions, um, which is, no easy task, especially with the growing conference. I think that you and I thought that this Pac-12 conference was kind of going to fall apart, and it did just the opposite. It built up, and I was very surprised. But looking at Utah, this year, of course, that loss to Florida really hurt them, and it was hard for them to bounce back from that. I was kind of worried that that was probably going to be the end of their season right there if they can't win at Florida. Um, but moving past that, you play USC in an all-out offensive battle. You win at home in overtime, and then you play them again for the Pac-12 championship, and you beat them again a second time. So for me, Cam Rising wasn't healthy for the second Rose Bowl in a row. You kind of take that out of the question when you get to bowl season. So for me, they're my standout. Back-to-back Pac-12 champions is no small task, as usual. But moving past our season in review, we get to our news. Of course, our news is brought to you by Yeti. If you guys want to go over there and get any Yeti merch, you guys can see the free shipping that is offered on all orders over $50. All your coolers, drinkware, and luggage needs for all of your durable adventures. You guys can head to the link below in our description for it, or if you're watching a live show, you can see it on there as well. Tyler, I'll let you take it away with the news.
Yeah, some big recruiting news actually today. Jaden Rashad picks Arizona State over Florida after the deal fall out. Now, if you all been watching this, he was offered originally a $13 million NIL deal from Florida, but there has been some issues with this Gators program under head coach Billy Napier. We saw one of their top linebackers dismissed from team violations. So we've seen a lot of players really decide really their talents elsewhere and enter the transfer portal. And Arizona State, I mean, this has been a QB carousel. We've seen Jaden Daniels for 3 to 4 years, and then when they went into this season with Emory Jones being their guy. he gets hurt and they have to go to somebody else. And then Jaden Rashada comes out of nowhere. So how much money Arizona State's offering over there in Tempe, but it's got to be a lot if he turned down $13 million to not play in the SEC. But I think that was definitely a surprising and shocking move to me. But if you're an Arizona State fan, you have to be intrigued by this. Rashada is a 5-star recruit. He really had some really good stats. He can really sling the ball. He can also beat you with his legs. It's a prototypical quarterback that we're seeing nowadays. It looks like we're seeing more of these dual threat quarterbacks, modern era of college football. So I think that this is going to be a big move. And obviously, we're talking about the Pac-12. We have to bring it up since it really goes around Arizona State. So we'll see. I know it's only one player. I'm not expecting this Arizona State team with Rashada to, go from a 4-win team to be in the championship. But I think that with Rashada, I think that they let him go in his freshman year. Don't really have to burn any red shirt or any of that. I just feel like there's no really other quarterbacks that's going to be above him. So I think that Rashada, we're going to see him step on the field whenever Arizona State really prepares for their season in fall practice. We'll definitely be able to get a first in spring game and also spring practices. So I definitely think that the future is bright for Arizona State. They do have a head coach. It's a defensive-minded head coach. So we'll see how that works out. So Rashada that's definitely news for the Sun Devils.
Yeah, it definitely is big news for Arizona State after, Herm Edwards is no longer their head coach and, really kind of battled through the end of their season there, got a couple of wins. I think it says more about Florida than it does Arizona State. Florida has kind of fallen off from what we've seen. They've had a lot of inside trouble, as you said. I just don't think Florida's the same team that, um, you know, they used to be. Back in the Tim Tebow days, Florida was unbelievable.
They're getting every recruit that they can think.
And yeah, I mean they were fantastic, and it just seems like it's fallen off, and Florida State's kind of taken over that state, and it really is the downfall of their organization. I thought bringing Billy Napier in was going to be a really good move for that team, and that school, and it hasn't come to fruition yet. But I think it's on the horizon. As for Arizona State, I think it's just one small move in their big leap to try to be competitive in the Pac-12. I think it ultimately can happen in the near future, maybe 4 and 5 years from now. They could be really competitive, and I think that's where you see like Oregon State come in, and maybe Arizona State be a little bit more competitive, Colorado be competitive. So I think a lot of that's on the horizon, and it's a big pickup for the Sun Devils.
Yeah, definitely a step in the right direction. We'll get to our second and last news segment. Not really much news going on in the off season. A lot of the transfer portal news have taken shape. All the deadline was actually late January, and the National Signing Day is happening. So the early signing day, a lot of guys already signed on the early signing day period in December. The February is really kind of a snooze now. I remember as a kid growing up, I used to just watch ESPNU and listen to the analysts talking on and on and on about the top recruits, and it's like no one really cares about it. But going back now to some Senior Bowl news and also some NFL news surrounding college football. One quarterback said at the Senior Bowl, the NFL will see a better version of Hendon Hooker. So that is definitely some bold words there. The Senior Bowl will be taking place Saturday afternoon in Mobile, your neck of the woods. Jacob has had some experiences in the Senior Bowl, so maybe you can shed some light on the viewers of what that experience is like. And then you also have the Shrine Bowl that'll be happening tomorrow. The East and the West team. The Senior Bowl is the American and the National. But I think that going back to what this quarterback says, it doesn't really say in the article its name, so I guess they just want to remain anonymous just in case Hooker doesn't us. But I don't really see it, and I think that Hooker is really going to be a real deal in the NFL. We saw what he could do, especially at Tennessee and even at Virginia Tech. He really had some underrated years at Virginia Tech, but he really showed what he could do this year. A very awful injury that he suffered against South Carolina, torn ACL. He won't be able to really go. He's at the Senior Bowl right now, but he won't be able to go through any drills for team. Then it's going to really linger into the scouting combine and the pro day. He won't be able to participate in that. So a lot of the scouts won't be able to really watch him in person. It's going to be more of an interview process more than anything. But I think that Hooker, even with the land in the second round, and there's a lot of quarterback needed teams. You have the Saints is one of them. You have the Colts. You have you thought you had the Bears until they locked up Justin Fields today. You have the Texans. You have the Panthers. You might be having the Titans, depending on Ryan Tannehill, and you're going to probably have the Buccaneers now that Tom Brady, if he stays retired and doesn't pull what he did last offseason. But I think that Hendon Hooker, even within, think that we could definitely see him, a better version of him. And after he gets healthy, we've seen guys really, be the same self or even better after their torn ACL injury. So I think that Hooker is really going to be one of the bright spots in this upcoming NFL draft class.
Yeah, I think we could really see a lot of these quarterbacks. You brought up the Bucks, and what they could do as far as their moves go, and I'm really interested to see what they do, because Brady no longer. Um, is Kyle Trask going to be their guy? It doesn't seem like it to me. That I think Kyle Trask is bound to be a backup for the time being. If they bring in a rookie, who could it be? Kind of thing, knowing that they don't have an early draft pick and it's a later draft pick. Are they going to trade up for one? What are they going to do? So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens there. But Hendon Hooker has a lot of upside, and he plays that pro style offense there in the backfield. And of course, running the hurry up at Tennessee really could be a big liking. It could take a big liking from a lot of NFL teams, knowing he can run the offense within himself pretty quickly, make decisions, and get rid of the football. They were an outstanding offense this year, with Hendon Hooker back there delivering the football. So I think, I don't know, you really could, you might see a homecoming type thing for Hendon Hooker and him stay in Tennessee and go to the Titans. I really could see that happen. With Malik Willis there, it's a kind of a 1-2 punch. So it could be very interesting to see what happens, unless Tennessee goes and gets Hendon Hooker and sees more in him than they did in Malik Willis and try to trade Malik Willis away for something. We could see that happen too as well. But of course, it is all up for speculation at this point until we get to that lovely draft day later this summer. But getting into our final segment, you guys know we always have to close out the episode with a question. Of course, that question is brought to you by Piper Golf. If you guys want to head over to piper.golf/sportscramble10, you guys can check out everything that Piper Golf has to offer with their golf balls for golfers of all ages, all skill levels. You guys can see that over there. They are tour quality balls at the non-tour price tag. So you guys can check that out at piper.golf/sportscramble10 to get you guys a little bit of a discount on some Piper golf balls. Tyler, getting to our question, it's an interesting one, and of course, that is, which Pac-12 team will make the biggest jump next season? This could be a very easy question, or it could be a very tough question, depending on how you gauge it. Give me your thoughts.
Yeah, this is definitely a tough question to really answer. I think that the Pac-12 is going to be another loaded conference. Again, you'll still have your teams at the top. Utah is going to be returning their quarterback. As in USC is not going to really lose much. They will lose Jordan Addison to the draft. Washington, you're going to have a lot of your key guys coming back. We mentioned UCLA is really the only team in the Pac-12 that's losing a lot. I mean, Oregon is going to be really loaded again. But I'm going to go with Colorado. I just feel like there's just something brewing in Boulder this offseason. I feel like I'm just into the culture that Dion, I mean, the first meeting that he's had, I mean, what him to say? I mean, that is just like run through a brick wall. mentality. He pretty much say, if you don't like competition, then get the F. That's pretty much what he said to all his players. And I definitely agree with that. I don't really like the transfer portal at times when players really just run away from the competition. That Dion really gets that, and he wants his players to really buy into what he's trying to build at Colorado. But I think that especially with the recruiting class that he's bringing in, the transfer portal, his son Shadir Sanders, he's going to be the starting quarterback. I mean, there's really no competition in Colorado. Their quarterbacks this year were really abysmal. And then you have Travis Hunter. I mean, you not only get your top quarterback, but you also a star. He's a really good athlete. He can beat you down the field. He was definitely a stud in his first year at Jackson State, and will continue to be a stud against these Pac-12 defenses. So it's not very hard for a one-win team to make the biggest jump. But I feel like this Colorado team is going to be a 7-win or an 8-win team. I feel something brewing. Hopefully they don't stupid and go like 3-9 next year, but we'll see. But right now I'm buying into the Colorado hype. So to answer the question, Colorado will be that team to make the biggest jump next season.
Yeah, that was the easy pick.
Yeah, that was the easy way
anything's
out. But you know
anything's
what?
better
I
than
just have to
1 and
take it.
11. Kind of a loaded question at that point, but for me, I'm gonna go a little higher. And it's kind of an interesting one. I'm gonna pick my team for the biggest jump to be Oregon State. I know that they
I knew
won
that was
double-digit
coming.
games this year, but it just seems like they're bound to be in a Pac-12 championship game. And I think this next year might be that year for them. They have experience. They didn't lose a whole heck of a lot. They got a lot of returning guys to this team, knowing what they can do, and what can be accomplished this upcoming season. I really think they could be, they're like I'll say it again. They're my dark horse pick for the Pac-12 title game, and I think that ultimately they're a contender, and I think that um, it is possible for them to get there. They have veteran quarterback uh, ability there on their team, and they're definitely a tough team on defense to play against. Of course, if you can play defense in the Pac-12, you can be competitive. That's how Oregon was so good for all those years. That's how Utah has been so good and won back-to-back Pac-12 championships. But excuse me, but I think it really speaks to the fact that if you carry defense with some sort of mid-tier offense, you can be a really, really competitive team in the Pac-12. For me, I think that's Oregon State. They hit all of the boxes for me. They check them all, and I do think the Beavers have uh, a big uh, goal set in mind for this next season, and that's being in the Pac-12 championship and ultimately trying to win the Pac-12 title game. Of course, if you guys think of any other team that you think should be that team to make the biggest jump in the Pac-12 conference, don't go to any other conferences yet. We just want Pac-12. If you do have some for the group of 5, throw those out there as well. We'll hit those, of course. Moving into next week, we don't want to introduce any other teams to make a big jump yet because our question might be different next week. It probably will be different next week. So we like spicing it up a little bit. But of course, we're keeping it short this week, guys. So just a little over a 30-minute show for today's episode and this week's episode. If you guys want to check out any more of a podcast that Tyler and I are in, you guys can check out the Sports Scramble podcast. That's on Sunday nights that we generally record that. It's a little bit of a wacky schedule going on right now, so you guys will have to stay tuned for some of that going on. And of course, we will probably maybe it's probably a 70% chance that we have a Super Bowl watch party there, so you guys can check that out over on Sports Scramble. Of course, for college football coast to coast, you can check out me and Tyler generally towards the beginning of the week, every week. Check out our live. You can check it out on Apple Podcasts and Spotify Podcast or wherever you get your podcast at. And SEC Talk is around the corner, talking about college basketball and baseball coming up here really soon. I know Tyler's really excited for that.
Oh, yeah.
So that'll be coming up really shortly. If you guys have any other questions, comments, and concerns, you can leave those down below or reach out to us on any of our pages. of course, next week I'll spill the beans now. Next week we are talking about the ACC. So we'll go
Ooh,
from west
conference.
to east. So we're going to the ACC to talk about all of the exciting things that have gone on over there this past season for our season review series. It'll be back next week with the ACC. So we will see you guys next week. And hopefully, I'm feeling better by then and have a little bit more energy for you guys. But we will see you next week for the ACC season preview.